sure it's known to companies and business. I'd see that it had a certain panache. That's what I'm good at. Not the work, not the work. Presentation. Kielbasa sausage, cheeses, beluga caviar. And of course, who could live without German cigarettes? As many as you can find. Some more fresh fruit. The real rarities, oranges, lemons, pineapples. And several boxes of Cuban cigars, the best. And dark unsweetened chocolate, not in the shape of ladyfingers. A chunk of chocolate, big as my hand, sample of wine tasting. 900, no, make it 10. For Wednesday. All this stuff here goes to my business sector. I lost a worker. I expect to be compensated. Is that right? Yes. Let's find it. Schnell! Stern! 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 Stop the train! Who's here? Stop the train! Stop the train! I woke up from a dream this morning. I was broke and sharing a room with 12 people I didn't know. Do you have any questions, sir? Yeah, I was top down. I'm fucking freezing.
When we left off, we were talking about the forced relocation of Jews into ghettos. You can see the ghettos and the range of time in which they were established in front of you. But these were just temporary solutions. So once they decided that pushing Jews out of Europe, they were done with that, then they decided that the Lebensraum that they were seeking, the living space they were seeking, they wanted to make sure didn't have anything left to contaminate it. So then they decided to exterminate the undesirables that were left. They started by relocating populations into the ghettos so that they could control the populations. And then what happened next was the evacuation of these ghettos one by one into concentration camps, which is what we'll talk about today. So there were a number of concentration camps. You can see, if you're looking down below, that there are 22 actual concentration camps, but the largest, there were 6 major concentration camps located primarily in what had been Poland. And the 6 major are Chelmno, Treblinka, Sobibor. There's a movie about an escape from Sobibor where there was extreme resistance. Majdanek, Belzec, and of course Auschwitz. Now I know that you guys are probably familiar with Dachau and Buchenwald and places like that, so I'm not suggesting that those didn't exist, but these were the major concentration camps over here to the east. So finally, Jews in communities not reached by the Einsatzgruppen or the early killing squads were drugged from their homes and herded onto trains and trucks for shipment into the ghettos and then eventually to the concentration camps, which were often labor camps. Families were often separated, sometimes forever. Nazi concentration camps were originally set up to imprison political opponents and protesters. The camps were later turned over to the SS, who expanded the concentration camps and used them as warehouses for undesirables in general. Life in the camps was a cycle of hunger, humiliation, and work that almost always ended in death. In one of the video clips that I have that I'm not going to get a chance to show you today, there was a Auschwitz survivor who'd read extensively, of course, about Auschwitz after the fact, and he said that what he learned were the rations inside of the camps were meant to keep someone alive at 6 months tops. So even if you didn't get selected to go to the shower right away, the rations you were receiving, they weren't enough to keep you alive long term. The prisoners were crammed into crude wooden barracks that held up to 1,000 people each. They shared crowded quarters as well as meager meals with hordes of rats and fleas. Hunger was so intense, recalled one survivor, that if a bit of soup spilled over, prisoners would converge on the spot, digging their spoons into the mud and stuffing the mess into their mouths to get just a bit. Inmates in the camps worked from dawn to dusk, 7 days a week, until they collapsed. Those too weak to work were killed. Some, like Rudolf Redder, endured. He was one of only 2 Jews to survive the camp at Belzec. A survivor of Belzec, Rudolf Redder, said, "The brute Schmidt was our guard. He beat and he kicked us if he thought we were not working fast enough. He ordered his victims to lie down and gave them 25 lashes with a whip, ordering them to count out loud. If the victim made a mistake, he was given 50 lashes. 30 or 40 of us were shot every day. A doctor usually prepared a daily list of the weakest men. During the lunch break, they would be taken out to a nearby grave and shot. They were replaced the following morning by new arrivals from the transport of the day. It was a miracle if anyone survived for 5 or 6 months in Belzec." The final stage. The final solution reached its final stage in early 1942. At a meeting held in Wannsee, a lakeside suburb of Berlin, Hitler's top officials agreed to begin a new phase of the mass murder of Jews. To mass slaughter and starvation, they would add a third method: killing. Murder by poison gas. As deadly as overwork, starvation, beatings, and bullets were, they did not kill fast enough to satisfy the Nazis. The Germans built 6 major death camps in Poland. The first, Chelmno, began operating in 1941, even before the meeting at Wannsee. Each camp had several huge gas chambers in which as many as 12,000 people could be killed a day. When prisoners arrived at Auschwitz, the largest of the death camps, they had to parade by several doctors. With a wave of the hand, the doctors would separate those strong enough to work from those who would die that very day. Both groups were told to leave all their belongings behind with a promise that they would be returned later. Those destined to die were then led into a room outside the gas chamber, were told to undress for a shower. To complete the deception, the prisoners were even given pieces of soap. Finally, they were led into the chamber and poisoned, most of the time with a cyanide gas that spewed from vents in the walls. This orderly mass extermination was sometimes carried out to the accompaniment of cheerful music played by an orchestra or camp inmates who had temporarily been spared execution.
Bees in Schutz is not the best part. I don't like bees. Bees and potatoes and bread. That's not the way you make Schutz. Eggs in Schutz? Yes. I don't like. No, you don't. What do you like? I like caviar. Caviar. One day on the fire. One day. 30, 40, 45.
There in Auschwitz, the train was never routed here. A pickle was it?
At first, the bodies were buried in huge pits at Belzec. Rudolf Ritter was part of a 500-man death brigade that labored all day, either at grave digging or emptying the gas chambers. But the decaying corpses gave off a stench that could be smelled for miles around, and worse yet, mass graves left evidence. At some camps, to try to cover up the evidence of their slaughter, the Nazis installed huge crematoriums or ovens in which they burned the dead. At other camps, the bodies were simply thrown into a pit and set on fire. Gassing was not the only method of extermination used in camps. Prisoners were also shot, hanged, or injected with poison. Still others died as a result of horrible medical experiments carried out by camp doctors. Many more were used to test methods of sterilizations, a subject of great interest to Nazi doctors in their search for ways to improve the master race.